Most of you watching this are going to set an alarm tomorrow morning. You're going to sit in traffic, put in your hours, come home exhausted, and somewhere in the back of your mind you're going to tell yourself it's worth it. Because someday you're going to retire. Someday you're going to stop. Someday you're going to be free. I need you to hear this clearly, that someday was never real. Not for most people. And it wasn't an accident. It was a design choice made over 2,000 years ago that we're still living inside of right now. My name is John, and what I'm going to show you in the next 13 minutes is the full history of how retirement was invented, who it was really invented for, and why the system you're counting on is not the system you think it is. This is not a doom video. By the end of it, you're going to know exactly what to do. But first you need to understand where this whole thing actually came from, because once you do, everything about your financial life starts making a different kind of sense. Chapter 1. Where it all started. For almost all of human history, retirement didn't exist. You worked until you couldn't work anymore, and then you were either taken care of by family or you weren't. That was it. No system, no plan, no pension. The very first time anyone tried to change that was in 13 BC, in ancient Rome, under Emperor Caesar Augustus. And I want you to understand why he did it, because the reason tells you everything about every retirement system that's come after it. Augustus had just come out of decades of civil war. The Republic had collapsed, his uncle Julius Caesar had been assassinated, and he was trying to hold a crumbling empire together, and his most important tool for doing that was his army. But the army had three serious problems. Soldiers were inconsistent and hard to keep loyal. They were more devoted to their individual generals than to Rome itself, which meant any popular general could turn his troops against the state and nobody could stop him. And when soldiers finished their service, they'd been promised land that the government had repeatedly failed to deliver. Angry, armed veterans with broken promises are about the most dangerous population a government can have. So in 13 BC, Augustus invented the world's first state-funded pension. Serve Rome for 25 years, and you'll receive a lump sum cash payment equal to 13 years of salary. He funded it through a 5% inheritance tax and a 1% sales tax. And on the surface, it looked like a generous reward for a lifetime of service. But here's what it actually was. It was a control mechanism. The documented rationale, not my interpretation, the actual recorded reasoning, was this. Pay the veterans off, and they'll be less likely to overthrow you. By tying soldiers' loyalty to Rome rather than to their generals. By giving them something worth waiting for, Augustus professionalized his army and secured his empire in one move. Quick thing before we go further. Next week, I'm covering exactly how much of your Social Security check the government quietly takes back through taxes. Most people have no idea it even happens. If you don't want to miss that, hit subscribe. It's free, and you can leave anytime. The pension was never about rewarding service. It was about managing people. And that one idea, using the promise of future security to control present behavior, is the thread that runs through every retirement system ever built, including the one you're paying into right now. The Roman system eventually collapsed with the empire in 476 AD. But the idea it planted didn't die. It just waited about 1400 years and showed up again, this time in Germany. Chapter 2. Germany and the carrot on the stick. We're in the 1880s now, and Germany is industrializing fast. Millions of people have moved from farms to cities to work in factories, under conditions that were genuinely brutal. 12 to 16-hour days, no sick leave, no protection if you got injured, and if you got too old to keep pace, you were out. No severance, nothing. And out of that desperation, the socialist movement was gaining real momentum. Workers were organizing. Chancellor Otto von Bismarck looked at that and saw a direct threat to the established order. His first move was to ban socialist meetings, publications, and organizing entirely. But he was smart enough to know that you cannot ban an idea. If the conditions that created the idea still exist, the idea survives. So he did something unexpected. He beat them at their own game. Between 1883 and 1889, Bismarck introduced national health insurance, accident insurance, and then the one that matters most for our story, old age and disability insurance. Germany's first modern, government-backed retirement system. Mandatory contributions from workers, employers, and the state. And when you reached retirement age, you'd receive monthly payments for life. Now here's where it gets interesting. The retirement age was set at 70 years old. In 1880s Germany, the average life expectancy at birth was around 42. Even if you survived childhood, the odds of actually reaching 70 were extremely slim. Most workers paid into that system their entire lives and never collected a single payment. Not because the system failed, because that was the design. The promise of a comfortable old age was real enough to keep people working and compliant, distant enough that most would never reach it. The carrot on the stick. You could see it. You could almost taste it. But for most people, it stayed just out of reach until the day they died. And that framework, mandatory contributions, government-backed promises, a retirement age conveniently out of reach for most people, became the blueprint the rest of the world would follow, including us. If you're finding this useful, a like genuinely helps more people find it. Takes 2 seconds. Chapter 3. America builds its version. Fast forward to America, 1929. The stock market loses 90% of its value. The economy contracts by nearly 30%. Unemployment hits 25% and stays there. Older Americans who had spent decades working and saving found themselves with absolutely nothing. No job, no savings, no family support system close enough to lean on, and no safety net of any kind. The pressure on the government to do something became impossible to ignore. And so in 1935, Franklin Roosevelt signed the Social Security Act, America's first major federal retirement program. Workers and employers each contributed a percentage of wages into a central fund, and when you reached 65, you started receiving monthly payments for life. For the first time in American history, the federal government was making that commitment. But there's a detail in that you need to know. The retirement age was 65. In 1935, average life expectancy at birth was 59. And even among those who did make it to 65, about half the workforce wasn't eligible to begin with. Agricultural workers and domestic workers were excluded. Those two categories were held overwhelmingly by Black Americans in the South, and their exclusion was not an oversight. It was a condition that Southern legislators insisted on before they'd vote yes. So the system had real limits from day one, but it also did something genuinely new. It created a floor. It kept people from starving, and over the next 3 decades it expanded. Survivor benefits in 1939, disability payments in 1956, Medicare in 1965. More workers were covered. The promise got more real.
And then for a brief stretch of American history, a very specific, very unusual stretch, retirement actually worked the way it was supposed to. Chapter 4, The Golden Age and Why It Ended. After World War II, America was in a position no country had ever been in before. Every other major industrialized economy had been bombed into rubble. We hadn't. Our manufacturing base was intact. The world needed everything we could make, and Americans who'd been living on wartime rationing were ready to spend. Unemployment went from a depression high of 25% to near 1% by 1944. Into that prosperity, 3 things came together to create what genuinely deserves to be called a golden age of retirement: rising wages, strong unions fighting for worker benefits, and the employer pension, a defined benefit plan where your company legally committed to paying you a specific monthly amount for the rest of your life, regardless of what the markets did. By 1980, 46% of private sector workers had one of those. Combined with Social Security and Medicare, a large portion of the American working class could realistically stop working at 65 and actually live, not just survive. Retirement became a lifestyle. Sun City in Arizona built an entire community around the idea. Golf carts and shuffleboard and no alarm clocks. The ARP was founded. Retirement wasn't the end of your life. It was the reward for your life. And for a while, it genuinely felt that way. But that golden age was built on conditions that couldn't last. America's post-war economic dominance, a small retiree population, a high ratio of workers to beneficiaries supporting the system, robust union power keeping employers accountable. When those conditions started shifting in the late 70s and into the 80s, the whole structure started coming apart. Quietly, piece by piece, in ways most people didn't notice until it was already done. The pension was expensive. ERISA regulations made it more expensive. Unions were losing power, and in 1978, buried in a tax bill, a provision called Section 401(k) was passed. A benefits consultant saw it and realized it could be used to create employer-sponsored savings accounts where employees contributed pre-tax. Companies saw it and realized something else. It let them off the hook. Instead of guaranteeing income for life, all they had to do was offer a small match and walk away. The investment risk, the decision-making, the planning, all of it shifted from the company onto you. Chapter 5. The system you're living in right now. Here's where we are today, in 2026. Only about 15% of private sector workers still have a traditional pension. According to Bureau of Labor Statistics data, roughly 28% of private sector workers have no employer-sponsored retirement plan of any kind, no 401k, nothing. And of those who do have access, nearly half aren't actively contributing. The median retirement savings for Americans between 55 and 64, the people closest to actually retiring, is $185,000. Americans themselves say they need $1.46 million to retire comfortably. That gap isn't a rounding error. That is a chasm. And Social Security, the one thing people still count on as a baseline, is under more pressure than it's been in decades. On June 9th of this year, the Social Security trustees released their 2026 annual report. The projected depletion date for the Retirement Trust Fund has been moved up to 2032, not the mid-2030s like people have been saying. 2032, 6 years from now. If Congress doesn't act before that date, the program will only be able to pay out 78% of promised benefits, a 22% across-the-board cut. For someone receiving the average benefit, that's roughly $500 a month gone. For a couple, that can mean $18,000 a year. The worker-to-beneficiary ratio, which was over 5 to 1 in the 1960s, is now 2.9 workers for every one retiree, and it's projected to fall to 2.2 by the 2070s. The math is tightening in a way that isn't solvable without either raising taxes, cutting benefits, or both. I want you to hold all of that and trace it back to the beginning of this video. Rome used the pension to keep soldiers compliant. Germany used it to suppress a workers' movement. America built it as a Depression-era floor, not a foundation. And the employer pension, the one thing that actually made the system work for regular people, was replaced by a self-managed account that most people were never trained to use. This was never designed for you to win. It was designed to keep you working, keep you hoping, and keep you just secure enough that you didn't demand something better. So what do you do with all of this? I'm not going to wrap this up with empty optimism, but I do want to leave you with 3 things that actually follow from everything we just covered. First, learn the game you're actually playing, not the one you thought you were. The 401k, the Roth IRA, employer matching, compound interest. These are real tools, and they work when you understand how to use them. The problem isn't that the tools are fake. The problem is the burden of learning them got dumped on people who were never taught. So get educated, not to celebrate a broken system, but because your financial future is too important to leave to the people who designed it. Second, stop treating Social Security as Plan A. Every system in this video, Rome, Germany, America, eventually changed its terms when it needed to. That is not paranoia. That is a 2,000-year track record. Build income streams that belong to you, that you control, that don't disappear when a policy changes. It doesn't have to be complicated. It just has to be yours. And third, rethink what retirement actually means to you. Work for 40 years, stop at 65, then finally start living. That model was built for a world that no longer exists, a world of stable pensions, affordable housing, and low healthcare costs. Maybe retirement for you looks like financial independence at 50. Maybe it's work you genuinely don't want to leave. Maybe it's a simpler life that costs less to sustain. The old model isn't coming back. But that's not just a loss, it's also an opening. Before I leave you with the last thought here, if you've made it this far, you're clearly someone who actually wants to understand this stuff rather than just scroll past it. The next video goes deeper on what you can do about it. Subscribe so you don't miss it. It's free, no commitment, cancel anytime. You have more tools, more information, and more flexibility than any generation that came before you. The system was never built for you to win, but you're not required to play by the system's rules. I'm John. If this video gave you something real, a like and a subscription genuinely helps this channel keep making content like this. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read them. Take care of yourself. I'll see you in the next one.